Salary negotiation. Like a Stoic, you're worth beyond numbers. Ever felt your heart race before asking for what you're worth? That pit in your stomach isn't weakness, it's humanity. But today we're tapping into something ancient and powerful. Stoic philosophy, the unexpected ally in your next salary negotiation. What if I told you the Romans and Greeks had already solved your compensation anxiety 2,000 years ago? The Stoics understood that true power comes not from desperate tactics or manipulation, but from something you already possess: inner clarity about your value. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal how adopting a Stoic mindset transforms not just how much you earn, but your entire relationship with work and worth. This isn't just another negotiation strategy, it's a philosophy for life that happens to make you more money. Part 1. The dichotomy of control principle. Have you ever noticed how your mind races with 1,000 different scenarios before a salary negotiation? You imagine your boss's face turning sour, or HR delivering a firm no, or even worse, being laughed out of the room. These mental movies play on repeat, draining your confidence with each screening. But what if I told you that this mental torment is completely optional? That there's a 2,000-year-old technique that can instantly cut through this anxiety? The ancient Stoics had a powerful observation that applies perfectly to modern salary negotiations. They noticed that human suffering comes from trying to control things that are fundamentally beyond our control. We waste precious mental energy worrying about outcomes we can't dictate. This insight leads us directly to our first Stoic negotiation principle. Principle number 1 of 12, the dichotomy of control. This ancient concept teaches us to sharply distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. In salary negotiations, you cannot control the company's budget. You cannot control whether your manager woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You cannot control market conditions or how desperate other candidates might be. Obsessing over these factors is like trying to control the weather. It's an exercise in frustration. What you can control is far more powerful. Your preparation, your delivery, your mindset, and your response. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Here's how this transforms your approach. Instead of entering a negotiation thinking, I need to get them to give me X amount, which puts the power in their hands, you shift to, I need to clearly communicate my value, which keeps the power in yours. Let me give you a concrete example. Sarah, a marketing specialist, was terrified about negotiating a raise. She kept thinking about how her company had recently lost a big client and how her boss might react negatively. These were factors beyond her control, and the anxiety was paralyzing her. When she adopted the dichotomy of control, she stopped ruminating on these factors. Instead, she focused exclusively on what she could control. Documenting her achievements, practicing her talking points, preparing responses to potential objections, and maintaining her composure during the conversation. The result? Her negotiation was focused, confident, and successful, not because she controlled the outcome, but because she controlled herself. To implement this principle today, create 2 columns on a piece of paper. In the left column, list everything about your salary negotiation that you can control. In the right column, list everything you can't control. Then make a deliberate decision to focus exclusively on the left column. This mental shift dramatically reduces anxiety because you're no longer trying to control the uncontrollable. You're channeling all your energy into what actually matters: your preparation and delivery. Remember, the Stoics weren't denying the importance of outcomes. They simply recognized that outcomes flow naturally from focusing on what's within our power. Master what you can control, and you've already won half the battle before you ever enter the negotiation room. Part 2. Preferred indifference. Have you ever noticed how desperately wanting something can actually make it harder to get? Like when you need a job so badly that you bomb the interview from sheer anxiety? Or when you're so determined to impress someone that you come across as trying too hard? There's a hidden power dynamic at work here that most people never recognize, but the ancient Stoics did. And understanding it will transform your next salary negotiation. The Stoics had a fascinating concept that seems counterintuitive at first glance. They believed that the things we should care about most, like health, wealth, and reputation, should be pursued with what they called preferred indifference. This doesn't mean not caring, it means caring in the right way.
This brings us to principle number 2 of 12. Preferred indifference. Learning to want your target salary without needing it. When you absolutely need a certain outcome from a negotiation, you create a power imbalance before you even start. Your desperation becomes like a scent that the other party can detect. It weakens your position and often leads to suboptimal results. But when you approach the negotiation with preferred indifference, you maintain your leverage and actually increase your chances of success. Here's what this looks like in practice. You've done your research and determined that $85,000 is an appropriate salary for your role and experience. You'd prefer to receive this amount. That's why it's called preferred indifference, not just plain indifference. But you're not emotionally attached to this specific number as the only acceptable outcome. Instead, you see the negotiation as a collaborative exploration of value, not a do-or-die scenario. This mental posture gives you tremendous power because it allows you to negotiate from a position of genuine strength rather than concealed weakness. Think about how differently these two mindsets play out in real time. When you need a certain number, you're more likely to accept the first offer, less likely to counter effectively, and more prone to making concessions that you later regret. But when you approach with preferred indifference, you can listen more attentively, respond more thoughtfully, and walk away if necessary. A client of mine, Marcus, was desperate for a 20% raise at his tech company. He had just bought a house and needed the money to make his mortgage payments. In his first negotiation attempt, this desperation was palpable, and his manager sensed it. The result? A measly 5% increase. After working with Marcus on developing preferred indifference, he approached his next review differently. He still wanted the raise, but he had mentally prepared himself to explore other options if necessary, including looking at other companies. This subtle but powerful shift in his mindset completely changed the dynamic. His manager could no longer sense desperation, and Marcus was able to artfully make his case from a position of calm confidence. The result? An 18% increase. To develop preferred indifference for your next negotiation, ask yourself, what would I do if I don't get my target number? Having a genuinely satisfactory plan B diffuses the desperation that undermines so many negotiations. It doesn't mean you won't get what you want. Paradoxically, it makes it more likely that you will. Remember, preferred indifference isn't about caring less, it's about caring better. It's about wanting the right salary without needing it in a way that creates weakness. This subtle mindset shift makes all the difference between an anxiety-filled negotiation and a powerful, effective one. Part 3. The virtue-based negotiation. Ever wondered why some professionals command premium salaries without seeming to negotiate at all, while others fight tooth and nail for every dollar? The difference often lies not in their negotiation tactics, but in how they frame their value from the very beginning. There's a profound insight from Stoic philosophy that can transform this entire dynamic, and it's probably not what you think. For most people, salary negotiations center around market comparisons. People with my job title make X, or the industry average is Y. While this information has its place, there's a more powerful foundation for your worth that few people leverage. This brings us to principle number 3 of 12. The virtue-based negotiation. Framing your worth through excellence rather than market comparisons. The ancient Stoics believed that the highest good was virtue or excellence, what they called arete in Greek. This wasn't about morality as we often think of it today. It was about excellence of character and action, being the best version of yourself and performing at your highest potential. When you position yourself as someone who embodies excellence in your role, you create a different kind of value proposition. You're no longer just another employee deserving market rate. You become someone whose commitment to excellence makes you inherently valuable. Here's what this looks like in practice. Instead of saying, "People in my position typically make X amount," you demonstrate how your excellence in your role creates specific, measurable value for the organization. This shifts the conversation from what others are worth to why your unique contribution deserves recognition. For example, Emma, a graphic designer, could have approached her salary conversation by noting that designers in her city average $70,000. Instead, she detailed how her commitment to excellence had led to a 40% increase in client engagement with marketing materials and a significant brand recognition boost measured through social media metrics. She wasn't just asking for market rate. She was showing how her pursuit of excellence translated to business results. To implement this principle, reflect on how your dedication to excellence manifests in your work. What problems have you solved that others couldn't? Where have you gone above and beyond? How has your commitment to quality created measurable impact? These become the foundation of your worth conversation. The beauty of the virtue-based negotiation is that it aligns your interests with the company's. You're not just extracting value, you're highlighting how your pursuit of excellence creates value. This makes the conversation collaborative rather than adversarial, exactly what the Stoics would advise. Remember, this approach doesn't replace market research. You still need to know what's reasonable. But when your primary positioning is excellence rather than market comparisons, you elevate the entire conversation. You become the professional who naturally commands premium compensation because your commitment to excellence makes you inherently valuable. This Stoic approach to valuing yourself transforms not just the negotiation, but how you approach your work every day. And that's something worth far more than a one-time salary bump. Part 4. Negative visualization as preparation. Have you ever walked into a negotiation feeling confident, only to have that confidence shatter the moment things don't go as planned? There's a mental preparation technique that ancient Roman generals, senators, and philosophers used before high-stakes situations that can transform your negotiation resilience. It's counterintuitive, but remarkably effective. Most negotiation advice tells you to visualize success, to see yourself confidently asking for what you want and getting it. While positive visualization has its place, the Stoics knew about a more powerful psychological technique that modern negotiators often overlook. This brings us to principle number 4 of 12. Negative visualization as preparation. Practicing what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils or challenges, to eliminate fear and develop unshakable confidence. Unlike positive visualization, which can leave you unprepared for obstacles, negative visualization involves deliberately imagining what could go wrong and mentally rehearsing how you'll respond. It's not about pessimism, it's about preparation that builds true confidence. Here's how this works. Before your negotiation, set aside 15 minutes to imagine specific challenging scenarios. What if they say they have no budget? What if they counter with a number far below your expectations? What if they question whether you deserve any increase at all? Now, instead of just worrying about these possibilities, mentally rehearse exactly how you'll respond to each one. Calmly, confidently, and effectively. This practice does something remarkable to your psychology. When you've already mentally encountered and overcome objections, they lose their power to rattle you in the actual negotiation. What would normally trigger anxiety instead triggers your prepared response. Your confidence doesn't evaporate because nothing truly surprises you. Let me share an example. Michael, a software developer, was preparing for a crucial salary negotiation. Instead of just hoping for the best, he practiced negative visualization. He imagined his manager saying, We simply can't meet that number given current budget constraints. Rather than fearing this response, Michael developed and rehearsed a specific reply. I understand budget considerations are important. Could we discuss a phased approach where my compensation increases over the next 2 quarters as I take on additional responsibilities? When his manager actually raised the budget concern during the real negotiation, Michael wasn't thrown off balance. He calmly delivered his prepared response, which led to a productive discussion and ultimately a compensation package that met his needs through a combination of immediate and future increases. This technique works because it transforms vague fears into specific scenarios with specific responses. The unknown is what creates anxiety. The known and prepared for creates confidence. To practice this today, write down the 3 objections or challenges you most fear in your upcoming negotiation. For each one, craft a specific, thoughtful response. Then mentally rehearse delivering these responses with calm confidence until they feel natural. The Stoics used this technique before important speeches, difficult conversations, and even battles. They knew that by mentally preparing for difficulties, they were inoculating themselves against the paralysis of fear and surprise. Remember, the goal isn't to dwell on negative outcomes or feed your anxiety, it's to build genuine, unshakable confidence through thorough preparation. When you've already faced the worst in your mind and developed responses, you enter the negotiation with a rare kind of calm strength that others will immediately notice and respect. This is the paradox of Stoic preparation. By deliberately contemplating what could go wrong, you become psychologically prepared for anything. And that preparation becomes the foundation of authentic confidence that no positive affirmation could ever create. Part 5. The Stoic Response to Rejection. What's your first reaction when someone says no to your salary request? For most people, it's disappointment, frustration, or even anger. These emotions are natural, but they can derail an otherwise promising negotiation. What if I told you that the ancient Stoics discovered a way to transform rejection from a roadblock into a pathway forward? This mental shift can completely change how salary negotiations unfold. Most negotiation advice focuses on avoiding rejection. But the reality is that hearing no is often an inevitable part of the process. What separates master negotiators from everyone else isn't avoiding rejection, it's how they respond to it. This brings us to principle number 5 of 12, the Stoic response to rejection. Transforming no into an opportunity through Stoic reframing techniques. The Stoics had a remarkable ability to reframe adversity as opportunity. When faced with rejection, they didn't see it as a failure, but as valuable information and an invitation to deeper understanding. This perspective is incredibly powerful in salary negotiations. Here's the key insight. When an employer says no to your salary request, they're not necessarily rejecting you or your value. They're rejecting a specific number in a specific context, and that distinction changes everything. Instead of treating rejection as the end of the conversation, treat it as the beginning of a more meaningful dialogue. A no is simply information that invites exploration. Why is it a no? What constraints are they working with? What alternatives might exist? Let me show you how this works in practice. Imagine you've asked for a $10,000 raise and your manager responds, "I'm sorry, but we can't do that." The typical reaction is to feel rejected and either accept defeat or become defensive. The Stoic response is radically different. First, pause and remind yourself that this no is not a judgment of your worth. It's information about their current position. Then, respond with curiosity rather than frustration. I appreciate your candid response. To help me understand better, could you share what factors are influencing that decision? This response transforms rejection from a dead end into an open door. It invites your manager to share constraints you may not be aware of, budget cycles, approval processes, company policies that are shaping their no. This new information becomes the foundation for exploring creative alternatives. Mark, a marketing director, experienced this firsthand. When his VP rejected his salary request, instead of becoming defensive, he responded with stoic curiosity. "I understand. Could you help me understand what would need to change for this to become possible in the future?" This simple question revealed that while budget constraints prevented an immediate raise, there was an opportunity to restructure his role to include leadership of an upcoming initiative, which would justify a compensation review in 3 months. What seemed like rejection became a roadmap to future success. To implement this approach in your next negotiation, practice these stoic reframing techniques. First, mentally separate the rejection of a number from rejection of your value. They are not the same thing. Second, prepare curiosity-based responses to no that invite explanation rather than confrontation. Third, listen for constraints and hidden opportunities in their explanation. And finally, use this new information to explore creative alternatives rather than forcing the original request. Remember, the goal of negotiation isn't to win by getting exactly what you initially asked for. It's to reach the best possible outcome given the realities both parties face. The Stoic approach to rejection keeps the conversation moving toward that goal even when the path isn't straightforward. By transforming no from an obstacle into an invitation, you maintain the collaborative spirit that leads to successful negotiations, and often the creative solution you discover together ends up being more valuable than your original request. Part 6. Self-examination before numbers. Have you ever walked into a salary negotiation without truly knowing what you want? Not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of what really matters to you? Most people focus entirely on researching market rates and company budgets, but completely skip the most crucial preparation of all: understanding themselves. The ancient Stoics knew that self-knowledge is the foundation of any meaningful negotiation, and this insight can transform how you approach your next compensation discussion. We've all been conditioned to believe that negotiation is primarily about tactics and techniques: what to say, when to say it, how to counter offers. But the Stoics recognized a deeper truth. The most powerful negotiation happens before you ever enter the room, in the quiet reflection where you clarify what truly matters to you. This brings us to principle number 6 of 12. Self-examination before numbers. The pre-negotiation Stoic reflection ritual that clarifies your true value beyond salary figures. The ancient Stoic philosophers practiced daily self-examination. They would review their actions, decisions, and values to ensure alignment between their principles and their lives. This same practice, when applied to negotiation preparation, creates remarkable clarity and confidence. Here's how to implement this principle. Before researching market rates or crafting your ask, set aside 30 minutes for deep reflection. Ask yourself these Stoic-inspired questions. What aspects of my work bring me the greatest sense of purpose and meaning? Beyond financial compensation, what elements of my role contribute most to my quality of life? What unique strengths and perspectives do I bring that create genuine value? If money were no object, what changes would I still want in my current work situation? What compromises am I willing to make, and which principles are non-negotiable? This reflection does something powerful. It clarifies what economists call your walk-away point and your ideal outcome. But more importantly, it helps you understand why these points matter to you, which gives you authentic conviction during the actual negotiation. Daniel, a product manager, practiced this self-examination before his annual review. Through reflection, he realized that while salary was important, having the flexibility to work remotely 2 days a week would significantly improve his quality of life and allow him to care for his aging parent. This clarity enabled him to negotiate creatively, ultimately accepting a smaller salary increase than initially planned in exchange for the flexible arrangement that addressed his deeper needs. Without this self-examination, he might have pushed solely for a higher number, missing an opportunity to address what truly mattered most to his overall well-being. To practice effective self-examination, find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Write down your answers to the reflection questions, being completely honest with yourself. Look for patterns and priorities that emerge from your answers. These become your true north during negotiations, not just the market research or compensation surveys. The beauty of this Stoic approach is that it transforms negotiation from a purely financial transaction into a meaningful discussion about value exchange. You're no longer just haggling over numbers, you're articulating a vision of mutual benefit based on deep self-understanding. Remember, the goal isn't to ignore financial considerations. Market research still matters, but when your negotiation position is grounded in genuine self-knowledge, you negotiate with an authenticity and clarity that no technique or tactic can provide. And often, this clarity leads to creative solutions that purely numbers-focused approaches would miss entirely. By practicing self-examination before focusing on numbers, you ensure that whatever outcome you achieve will truly align with what matters most to you. And that's the ultimate measure of negotiation success. Part 7. The View from Above Technique. Have you ever been so consumed by the details of a negotiation that you lost sight of the bigger picture? Maybe you walked away from a promising job because the salary was $5,000 below your target, only to realize later that the growth opportunity was worth far more. Or perhaps you became so fixated on winning the negotiation that you damaged an important relationship. There's a powerful Stoic technique that can prevent these common negotiation missteps. Most negotiation advice focuses on tactical details: what to say, how to counter, when to walk away. But the ancient Stoics knew that seeing the bigger picture provides strategic wisdom that no tactic can replace. This broader perspective can completely transform how you approach salary discussions. This brings us to principle number 7 of 12. The View from Above Technique. How zooming out to see the cosmic insignificance of a single negotiation paradoxically empowers you to negotiate more effectively. The Stoics practiced a mental exercise they called the view from above. They would imagine themselves rising high above their current situation, seeing it from increasingly distant perspectives, from the height of a building, then a mountain, then the stars. From this imagined height, personal concerns that had seemed all-consuming would appear in their true proportion, small parts of a vast cosmos. This might sound abstract, but its practical application to salary negotiation is profound. By mentally zooming out from the immediate negotiation, you gain clarity about how this single conversation fits into the bigger picture of your career, your life, and what truly matters to you. Here's how to apply this technique. Before your negotiation, take 5 minutes to practice the view from above. Imagine yourself rising up, seeing your upcoming negotiation from increasingly broader perspectives. First, see it from the perspective of your entire career spanning decades. Then, view it from the perspective of your whole life, including family, health, and personal growth. Finally, see it from the perspective of humanity and the brief span of time we each have. This exercise doesn't diminish the importance of the negotiation. Instead, it places it in its proper context, reducing anxiety and creating space for strategic thinking. Consider how this played out for Jamie, a designer who was preparing for a high-stakes salary discussion. She was intensely anxious about asking for a significant increase. By practicing the view from above, she realized that this single conversation, whether it went perfectly or poorly, was just one small moment in a decades-long career. This perspective didn't make her less prepared, it made her more effective by freeing her from the paralyzing pressure of treating the negotiation as an all-or-nothing moment. When the actual discussion took place, Jamie was able to remain calm and focused on long-term value rather than getting caught up in the emotional intensity that might have otherwise derailed the conversation. The result? A successful negotiation that felt less like a battle and more like a meaningful discussion. To implement this technique effectively, find a quiet moment before your negotiation. Close your eyes and literally imagine yourself floating upward, seeing your situation from increasingly distant perspectives. Notice how your emotional response changes as your perspective broadens. Carry this expanded awareness into your negotiation. The paradox of the view from above is that by recognizing the relative smallness of a single negotiation, you free yourself to bring your best thinking to it. When you're not crushed by pressure or blinded by short-term concerns, you negotiate with wisdom that tactics alone can't provide. Remember, this isn't about caring less, it's about caring more wisely. It's about maintaining perspective that allows you to navigate the conversation strategically rather than reactively. And often, this broader perspective leads to better outcomes than intense focus on immediate results ever could. By practicing the view from above, you bring a rare quality to your negotiations. Wisdom that transcends technique and transforms the entire dynamic of the conversation. Party 8. Stoic counteroffers. Have you ever received a salary offer that was insultingly low? Or had a counteroffer met with resistance that made you feel undervalued? These moments trigger powerful emotions, anger, disappointment, even desperation, that can hijack your negotiation strategy in an instant. Most people either react emotionally or try to suppress their feelings entirely. But the Stoics knew there was a more powerful alternative that transforms how counteroffers unfold. Most negotiation advice treats emotion as an enemy to be controlled, but the ancient Stoics understood something deeper. It's not about suppressing emotions, but transforming them through philosophical perspective. This insight creates a powerful approach to handling counteroffers that few modern negotiators have mastered. This brings us to principle number 8 of 12. Stoic counteroffers. The art of responding to lowball offers with philosophical detachment that commands respect rather than desperation. The key Stoic insight is that our emotional reactions come not from events themselves, but from our judgments about those events. A low offer isn't inherently insulting. It becomes insulting when we judge it that way. By consciously changing our judgment, we change our emotional response and gain tremendous negotiation power. Here's how this works in practice. When you receive an offer below your expectations, pause before responding. In that pause, shift your perspective from judgment, "This is insulting," to neutral observation. This is simply information about their current position. This subtle mental shift transforms your emotional state from reactive to responsive. From this place of philosophical detachment, you can craft a counteroffer that comes from strength rather than emotional reaction or desperation. You're not angry, you're not pleading, you're simply engaging in a rational discussion about value. Consider how differently this played out for two colleagues, Alex and Jordan, who both received the same below-market offer. Alex reacted with obvious disappointment and frustration, then countered by emphasizing his financial needs. The hiring manager sensed his emotional investment and held firm, leading to minimal movement. Jordan, practicing Stoic detachment, responded to the same offer with calm curiosity. "I appreciate the offer. Based on my research and the value I bring in areas X, Y, and Z, market compensation for this role is typically 15 to 20% higher. I'm confident we can find an arrangement that reflects this value. What flexibility do you have on the base compensation?" Her detached but confident approach led to a significantly improved offer because it commanded respect, rather than revealing desperation. To implement this approach in your next negotiation, practice these 3 steps. First, mentally prepare for low-ball offers by deciding in advance how you'll interpret them, as information, not insults. Second, when receiving any offer, pause before responding to ensure you're operating from philosophical detachment, rather than emotional reaction. Third, frame your counteroffer in terms of objective value, rather than personal need or emotional appeal. The beauty of the Stoic approach to counteroffers is that it transforms the entire dynamic of the negotiation. When you respond with philosophical detachment, you display a rare kind of confidence that naturally commands respect. You signal that your worth is an objective reality, not a subjective opinion up for debate. Remember, detachment doesn't mean not caring about the outcome. It means caring in a way that empowers rather than diminishes you. It's about responding from a place of inner strength rather than external pressure. By mastering the art of Stoic counteroffers, you develop a negotiation presence that naturally commands better offers, not through aggressive tactics or emotional appeals, but through the quiet power of philosophical perspective that the Stoics mastered centuries ago. Part 9. Memento Mori in Career Planning. Have you ever achieved a salary goal only to discover it didn't bring the satisfaction you expected? Or declined a potentially rewarding opportunity because it paid less than your target number? There's a profound Stoic principle that completely transforms how we think about compensation by shifting our focus from immediate numbers to what truly matters in the limited time we have. It's a perspective few negotiators consider, but it can be life-changing. Most negotiation advice treats salary as an end in itself. Get the highest number possible, period. But the ancient Stoics recognized that money is valuable only insofar as it supports a well-lived life. This insight leads to a radically different approach to salary negotiations. This brings us to principle number 9 of 12. Memento Mori in Career Planning. How remembering life's finite nature helps you negotiate for what truly matters beyond just money. Memento Mori, remember that you will die, was a central Stoic meditation. Far from being morbid, this reflection was meant to create clarity about priorities and eliminate trivial concerns. When applied to salary negotiations, it transforms your focus from short-term gains to meaningful value. Here's how this works. Before entering compensation discussions, reflect on the finite nature of your career and life. Ask yourself, if I had only 10 more years to work, would I prioritize a higher salary over purpose, growth, balance, or impact? This perspective shifts your negotiation from being solely about maximizing dollars to optimizing for overall life value. This doesn't mean accepting less than your worth. Rather, it means negotiating holistically for the complete package that supports your well-lived life, which sometimes means prioritizing factors beyond base salary. Consider Thomas, a marketing executive who received 2 offers, one with a higher salary but requiring 60-plus hour weeks and constant travel, another offering 15% less but with reasonable hours and flexibility to be present for his family. The typical advice would be to take the higher number or use it as leverage. But reflecting on life's finite nature, led him to negotiate differently, securing improvements to the second offer while accepting that some salary differential was worth the life quality gained. 5 years later, while his former colleagues were burning out and missing their children's milestones for marginally higher pay, Thomas had built both a successful career and meaningful family memories that no salary could replace. To apply this principle to your negotiations, try this exercise. Write your own career eulogy, what you hope could be truthfully said about your work life when it's complete. Notice how much focuses on impact, relationships, and meaningful contribution rather than compensation milestones. Let this insight guide what you prioritize in your next negotiation. When actually negotiating, expand the conversation beyond base salary to include factors that support your well-lived life, whether that's flexibility, growth opportunities, meaningful projects, or supportive culture. Be willing to make thoughtful trade-offs that align with your deeper priorities. The beauty of the memento mori perspective is that it creates both clarity and courage. You gain clarity about what truly matters to you beyond numbers, and courage to negotiate for these factors even when they diverge from conventional wisdom about maximizing your worth. Remember, this isn't about settling for less. It's about defining worth in terms of your whole life, not just your bank account. Often, this perspective actually leads to better financial outcomes over time, because you make career decisions aligned with sustainable growth rather than short-term gains. By bringing memento mori awareness to your negotiations, you ensure that whatever compensation package you secure will support not just your financial needs, but your most meaningful life. And that's a form of wealth beyond measure. Part 10. The Stoic Communication Framework. Have you ever struggled to find the right words during a salary negotiation? Perhaps you've come across as too aggressive and damaged the relationship, or too passive and left money on the table. There's a communication approach from Stoic philosophy that strikes the perfect balance, projecting quiet confidence while maintaining goodwill. It's a way of speaking that naturally commands respect without ever seeming arrogant or entitled. Most negotiation advice gives you specific scripts or phrases to use, which can come across as formulaic or manipulative. But the ancient Stoics developed something more powerful, a comprehensive philosophy of communication that can be applied to any negotiation scenario. This brings us to principle number 10 of 12, the Stoic Communication Framework. Specific language patterns inspired by Seneca and Marcus Aurelius that command respect without arrogance. The Stoics were masterful communicators who understood that how we speak reveals our character and shapes how others respond to us. Their writings contain powerful insights about language that can transform your negotiation presence. Here's the essence of the Stoic communication framework. Speak plainly without embellishment. State facts rather than complaints. Express preferences rather than demands. Take ownership rather than placing blame. And always maintain goodwill toward the other party regardless of outcome. This approach creates a powerful impression of quiet confidence that naturally commands respect. You're neither pleading from weakness nor demanding from entitlement. You're simply engaging in rational discourse about value exchange. Let me show you what this looks like in practice with some specific language patterns. Instead of the emotional, "I'm disappointed with this offer as it doesn't reflect my contributions." The Stoic version, "The market rate for this role with my experience level is typically X. My contributions in areas A, B, and C align with these standards." Rather than the entitled, "I need at least X to accept this position." The Stoic approach. "Based on my research and the value I bring, my target compensation is X. I'm interested in finding a solution that works for both of us." Instead of the blame placing, Your budget constraints aren't my problem. The Stoic alternative. I understand there may be budget considerations. Perhaps we could explore creative solutions that address both your constraints and my compensation goals. Notice how the Stoic versions state facts objectively, take ownership of preferences, and maintain goodwill, all while clearly communicating value and expectations. Rebecca, a UX designer, implemented this framework in her negotiation after receiving an initial offer. Rather than expressing disappointment or making demands, she responded with Stoic clarity. "Thank you for the offer. My research indicates that UX designers with my specialized healthcare experience typically earn between X and Y. Given the impact of my work on patient outcomes, as demonstrated in my portfolio, I believe a figure in that range would appropriately reflect the value I'll bring to your team. I'm open to discussing how we might reach an agreement that recognizes this value." This response, factual, ownership-taking, and maintaining goodwill, led to a respectful discussion and a revised offer that met her target. To implement this framework, review your planned negotiation language for emotional appeals, demands, blame, or complexity. Replace these elements with plain statements of fact, clear expressions of preference, personal ownership, and goodwill. Practice these patterns until they become natural. The goal isn't to sound like a Stoic philosopher, but to embody the principles that made their communication so effective: clarity, rationality, and goodwill. The beauty of the Stoic communication framework is that it works regardless of the other party's approach. Even if they become emotional or adversarial, your Stoic communication maintains the higher ground and often brings them back to a more productive discussion. Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe to our channel and give your support. Thanks.